I stared at the cream-colored envelope that someone had slipped under my door. My stomach doing that weird flip it does when you know something's not quite right. No name, no return address, just my apartment number written in precise, angular handwriting. My name is Tessa, and until this moment, I'd been having what I thought was the best month of my life. My fitness blog had just hit 100,000 subscribers, my relationship with Nolan was getting serious, and I was finally going to meet his family this weekend. Well, officially meet them. But this letter changed everything. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the same precise handwriting. If you care about your future with Nolan, be careful around his mother. She's destroyed relationships before, and you're next on her list. Don't say you weren't warned. I read it 3 times, my hand shaking more with each pass. The paper felt expensive, the kind you'd find in a fancy stationery store. My phone buzzed, making me jump. Nolan's face lit up my screen. "Hey, beautiful, just checking in about Saturday," his warm voice filled my ear. "Mom's really excited to meet you properly." I swallowed hard, crumpling the letter in my free hand. "Yeah, about that. Please tell me you're not backing out," he said, that edge of anxiety creeping into his voice. "You know how important this is to me." I glanced at the crumpled warning in my hand. No, I'm still coming. Just nervous, I guess." "Don't be. They're going to love you." "Well, Drew already does. He won't shut up about your workout videos." I forced a laugh, but my mind was racing. Drew, Nolan's younger brother, was the only family member I'd met so far. He'd seemed genuine friendly. Could he have sent this? "Tess? You still there?" "Sorry, just thinking about what to wear," I lied. "Your mom seems traditional. I want to make a good impression." There was a slight pause. "Just be yourself. That's who I fell in love with." After we hung up, I smoothed out the letter and took a photo, sending it to my mom. Within minutes, my phone rang. "Have you told Nolan?" Mom asked, skipping hello. "Not yet. I don't want to start drama before I even meet his family." "Honey, this is drama. Someone's trying to warn you." "Or mess with me," I countered, but my voice lacked conviction. "Maybe it's just a prank." "That paper is Crane and Company, I'd recognize it anywhere." "That's not prank material, that's serious money." Mom had worked at a high-end paper store for years. "Someone from their social circle sent this." I sank onto my couch, the reality of the situation hitting me. "Mom, what do I do?" "You go to that dinner. You watch, you listen, and you trust your gut." "But Tessa." Her voice got serious. "Don't show your hand. If someone felt strongly enough to warn you, there's a reason." After we hung up, I pulled up the Fisher family photos Nolan had shown me. There was Meredith Fisher, his mother, elegant and poised in every shot. Her smile never quite reached her eyes, especially in the photos with Nolan's previous girlfriend. Come to think of it, I'd never heard why they broke up. My phone buzzed again, a text from Drew. "Fair warning, Mom's planning to go full Martha Stewart on Saturday. Hope you're ready for the 3rd degree about your internet career, grinning face with sweat." I started typing a response, then stopped. Was this his way of warning me too? I looked at the letter again, then at my phone. Everyone was trying to tell me something without really telling me anything. Well, game on, Meredith Fisher. If she wanted to play puppet master with her son's life, she was about to learn I wasn't the kind of girl who danced on anyone's strings. I just hoped I wasn't making a huge mistake by walking straight into whatever she had planned. The Fisher house loomed before me, all red brick and pristine white columns. I smoothed my dress for the 10th time, wishing I'd worn something less fitted. Next to me, Nolan squeezed my hand. "Ready?" he asked, reaching for the brass knocker. Before he could touch it, the door swung open. Meredith Fisher stood there, perfectly coiffed in a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You must be Tessa," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We've heard so much about your internet activities." I felt Nolan tense beside me. Mom, Tessa's fitness channel has over 100,000 followers. She's built a real business. How fascinating, Meredith replied, stepping aside. Though I always thought personal training was more of a hobby than a career. The warning letter flashed through my mind as I followed them into a living room that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everything was pristine, controlled just like Meredith. Drew appeared from the kitchen, grinning. Hey, the famous Tessa. Mom, did you know she was featured in Women's Health last month? Was she? Meredith's voice could have frozen water. I must have missed that issue. I prefer more traditional publications. Throughout dinner, every compliment came with a barb. My healthy eating tips were trendy fads. My business model was risky. Even my wine choice earned a raised eyebrow and a murmured, "How modern." So, Tessa, Meredith said as she served dessert, Nolan mentioned you grew up in Rochester? With just your mother? Yes, after my dad passed away. Oh, how difficult that must have been. Her sympathy dripped like poison honey. Although I suppose that explains your need to be so independent. Nolan suddenly became very interested in his creme brulee. Actually, I said, maintaining eye contact with Meredith, my mom taught me that independence isn't about being alone, it's about choosing your own path. Indeed. Meredith set down her spoon with a delicate clink. Though, in my experience, family traditions provide a much more stable foundation than experimental lifestyle choices. Mom, Drew interrupted, didn't you say you wanted to show Tessa the garden? Of course. Meredith stood, gesturing for me to follow. Nolan, help your brother clear the table. In the moonlit garden, Meredith stopped by a rose bush. These have been in the Fisher family for generations. Spring, they bloom exactly as expected. No surprises, no disappointments. They're beautiful, I said carefully. But sometimes unexpected growth can create something even more spectacular. She turned to face me fully. Let me be clear, Tessa. My sons are my life. I've guided them, shaped them, protected them from unfortunate influences. I won't see that work undone by someone who thinks life is a series of Instagram stories. Mrs. Fisher. Please, she cut me off with a razor smile. Call me Meredith. We're practically family. For now. Back inside, I found Nolan in the kitchen. Your mother just threatened me. What? No, she wouldn't. She basically said I'm not good enough for you and won't last. Nolan ran a hand through his hair. That's not what she meant. Mom's just traditional. Give her time. Traditional. I laughed incredulously. Nolan, she's actively trying to undermine our relationship. You're being sensitive. She's making an effort. Like hell she is. My voice rose before I could stop it. Everything okay in here? Drew appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Fine, Nolan said quickly. Tessa's just tired. We should probably head out. In the car, the silence was deafening. Finally, I spoke. You're not going to stand up to her, are you? There's nothing to stand up to. You don't understand our family dynamic. You're right, I cut him off. I don't understand how you can let her treat people this way. But I'm starting to understand why your last girlfriend left. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. That was different. Was it? I stared out the window, the anonymous letter's warning echoing in my head. Or was she just smart enough to get out before your mother destroyed everything? Nolan didn't answer, and I realized with crushing clarity that I was on my own in this battle. But Meredith Fisher had no idea who she was dealing with. If she wanted war, I'd give her one hell of a fight. Comments started appearing on my blog 3 days after the dinner. First, they seemed random criticisms about my form, questioning my credentials, suggesting my advice was dangerous for impressionable young women. But as I scrolled through them, a pattern emerged. A proper lady maintains dignity, not followers. Some traditions exist for a reason. Family values are more important than fleeting internet fame. Comment echoed Meredith's words from dinner down to her exact phrasing. I was checking the IP addresses when my phone buzzed, Drew calling. Have you seen Mom's browser history? He asked without preamble. What? I borrowed her laptop to check email. She forgot to clear her history. Tessa, she's been watching every single one of your videos, reading every blog post. She's obsessed. My hands started shaking. The comments. Probably her. Listen, there's more. Remember Caroline, Nolan's ex? Mom did the same thing to her. Started with small criticisms, then escalated to contacting Caroline's employers with concerns about her character. Caroline quit her job and moved to Seattle. I sat down hard. Does Nolan know? He suspects, but Mom's good at playing victim. If anyone confronts her, she breaks down about how she's just trying to protect her family. A notification popped up on my laptop, another comment. Some people mistake attention-seeking for success. Sad to see young women led astray by social media validation. Drew, she's going to try to destroy my business. I know. That's why I'm warning you. But be careful. If you confront her, she'll make you look like the aggressor. After we hung up, I pulled up my latest video. Comment section was flooded with new criticisms, all in that same proper cutting tone. My phone buzzed again. Nolan. Hey, can we talk? Mom's upset about something you posted? I laughed incredulously. You mean the dozens of nasty comments she's leaving on my content? What? No, she mentioned a video where you're apparently promoting unhealthy body standards. She's worried about your influence on young women. Are you serious right now? Your mother is actively trying to sabotage my career, and you're buying her concerned act? Look, maybe if you just talk to her. I did talk to her. She threatened me in her garden, remember? The garden you refused to believe she threatened me in? Silence on his end. Then she's just protective. Stop making excuses. I was shouting now. Your mother is systematically trying to destroy everything I've built, just like she did to Caroline. And you're letting her. Don't bring Caroline into this. Why not? Because it proves I'm right? Because you know exactly what your mother's capable of and you're too scared to stand up to her? The doorbell rang. Through my apartment's peephole, I saw Meredith Fisher herself, perfectly composed in another expensive sweater. Nolan, I have to go. Your mother's here. What? No, wait. I hung up and opened the door. Meredith smiled that razor smile. Tessa, dear, I thought we should have a chat about your recent content choices. You mean the content you've been obsessively commenting on? Her smile didn't waver. I'm simply expressing concern about the message you're sending. As Nolan's mother, you're terrified of losing control. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Rage? You don't understand our family. No, I understand perfectly. You destroyed Caroline's career to keep control of Nolan. Now you're trying to do the same to me. But here's the difference. I stepped closer. I'm not Caroline. And if you want a war, I'll give you one. Are you threatening me? No, Meredith. I'm promising you that if you don't back off, I'll expose exactly who you are. To Nolan, to your precious social circle, to everyone. Her composure cracked just for a second. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Now get out of my apartment. After she left, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely text Drew. Your mother just showed up. Things just got real. His response came quickly. Check your email. There's something you need to see about Mom's past. I opened my laptop, my heart pounding. Whatever Drew had found, it was time to turn the tables on Meredith Fisher. I met Drew at a coffee shop across town, far from his mother's usual haunts. He looked exhausted, sliding a manila envelope across the table before I could even sit down. I found these in Mom's study, he said quietly. In a locked drawer behind her desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. The headlines jumped out. Local woman missing after domestic dispute. Search continues for Margaret Fisher. Fisher family maintains silence on disappearance. Margaret Fisher? My hands trembled as I spread the clippings across the table. Our aunt. Mom's sister. Drew's voice dropped lower. The one nobody talks about. The articles painted a disturbing picture. 25 years ago, Margaret Fisher had vanished after a public argument with her family. Police investigated but found nothing. Case went cold. There's more, Drew said, pulling out a stack of letters. These are from Margaret to Mom, sent over the years. Mom kept them all but never responded. I scanned the letters. They were desperate pleas for reconciliation, each one more heartbreaking than the last. What happened between them? Drew glanced around the cafe before answering. Margaret fell in love with someone the family didn't approve of. A woman. Mom couldn't handle it. She threatened to expose Margaret to their social circle, their father's business partners. Back then, it would have ruined everything. So Margaret left? She chose freedom over family. Mom never forgave her for breaking ranks. Drew's hands clenched around his coffee cup. That's when Mom started. Controlling everything. She was terrified Nolan and I would leave too. My phone buzzed, Nolan calling again. I declined it. Does he know about any of this? Drew shook his head. Mom told us Margaret died in an accident. I only found out the truth when I found these letters. That's why you've been helping me. The realization hit hard. You don't want history repeating itself. Mom's already destroyed one family. I won't let her destroy another. He pulled out one final letter, newer than the others. This came last week. Margaret's in Seattle now. She's been following your blog, saw you were dating Nolan. She wants to meet. My heart pounded. Does Meredith know? No, but... Drew's eyes widened, focusing on something behind me. Shit. I turned to see Meredith Fisher standing in the doorway of the cafe, her face white with fury. Our eyes met across the room. Drew, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the quiet space. What are you doing? Mom, are these my private papers? She approached our table, each step measured and precise. You broke into my study? You broke into my life, I shot back, standing to face her. Harassed me online, threatened my business. To protect my family. Her composure cracked. You have no idea what's at stake. I know about Margaret, I said quietly. Color drained from her face. You don't know anything. I know you drove your own sister away because you couldn't control her. Just like you did with Caroline. Just like you're trying to do with me. Mom, Drew stood too, Margaret's alive. She wants to talk. Enough. Meredith's hand slammed down on the letters. These are private family matters. Which makes them my business, Nolan's voice cut through the tension. We all turned to see him standing there, holding his phone. Drew called me before you arrived, Mom. I heard everything. The look on Meredith's face, shock, betrayal, fear, would have been satisfying if it wasn't so tragic. She grabbed for the letters, but I was faster, snatching them away. Your choice, Meredith, I said softly. We can all talk about this like adults, or these letters go public. Margaret's story, Caroline's story, everything. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I met her gaze steadily. But first, you need to tell Nolan the truth. All of it. Cafe had gone silent, other patrons pretending not to watch our family drama unfold. Meredith looked from me to her sons, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Finally, she sank into a chair, her shoulders sagging. I was trying to protect you, she whispered. No, Mom, Nolan said firmly. You were trying to control us. And it stops now. The Seattle rain matched my mood as I waited outside the small cafe where Margaret Fisher had agreed to meet. After the confrontation with Meredith, everything felt raw, unfinished. Nolan hadn't spoken to his mother in days, and the silence was deafening. A woman approached, and I knew immediately it was Margaret. She had Meredith's elegant posture, but her eyes were kinder, less guarded. She wore a rainbow pin on her jacket, a small act of defiance that spoke volumes. "You must be Tessa," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me." Inside, over coffee, Margaret studied me carefully. "You look shell-shocked." I remember that look. I used to see it in the mirror every morning before I left. "Did you know about Caroline?" I asked. "The girlfriend before me?" I followed the Fisher family drama from afar. Meredith's patterns are predictable. She pulled out her phone, showing me a social media profile. "This is my partner, Helen. We've been together 23 years. Longer than Meredith's been pretending I'm dead." My phone buzzed, another text from Nolan. "We need to talk about Mom." I ignored it. Why reach out now? Because history's repeating itself, and I'm tired of watching from the sidelines. Margaret leaned forward. "But also because you're different. You're fighting back. Not very successfully. You got my nephew to finally stand up to his mother. That's more than anyone's managed in decades." She paused. "But there's something you should know about the night I left." Before she could continue, the cafe door chimed. Drew rushed in, looking panicked. "Aunt Margaret?" His voice cracked. Mom said you were dead." Margaret's composure wavered. "Hello, Drew. You were so small when." "Tessa," Drew cut in, "Mom's at your apartment. She's threatening to call your fitness certification board with concerns about your methods. She's spiraling." My blood ran cold. "She wouldn't. She already has the number pulled up. Says if you don't back off about Margaret, she'll destroy your career." Margaret's face hardened. "Some things never change." When I left, she threatened to out me to every potential employer in the state. "Did she follow through?" I asked. "No. 'Cause I left first." Disappeared completely. Margaret's eyes met mine. "But running isn't the answer. It just gives her more power." My phone buzzed again. "Nolan, Mom's losing it. Please call me." "I need to stop her," I said, standing. "Wait." Margaret grabbed my arm. "There's something else you need to know. The night I left, Meredith didn't just threaten me. She threatened herself. Said she'd rather die than see the family name ruined. I thought she was manipulating me, but what? I found her with pills. That's why I left so suddenly. I couldn't bear the guilt if so I disappeared instead. Let her tell everyone I was dead. It was easier than facing the truth, that my sister would rather die than accept me." Drew sank into a chair, face pale. "Mom tried to." "She's not evil, Drew. She's broken. Terrified of losing control because she never dealt with almost losing everything." Margaret's voice softened. "But enabling her fear isn't helping anyone." My phone lit up with a text from my mom. "Meredith Fisher just called me. Says she's concerned about your mental health." What's going on? Pieces clicked together. Meredith wasn't just attacking my career, she was trying to discredit me completely. Make any accusations I made sound like the ravings of an unstable person. "I have to go," I said, gathering my things. "But first, Margaret, would you be willing to come with me? To see Meredith? After all these years, to save her from herself, and maybe save this family in the process." Margaret stared at her coffee cup for a long moment. "The last time I saw my sister, she was willing to die to maintain her perfect facade. What makes you think this time will be different?" I pulled out the anonymous warning letter that had started everything. Because someone in this family cared enough to warn me. Someone wants this cycle to end. Drew's eyes widened with recognition. The letter? Mom wrote it herself, didn't she? Part of her wants to be stopped. Margaret stood, straightening her jacket. Well then, let's go stop her. Together. As we left the cafe, I realized we were either about to heal this family or tear it apart completely. Either way, there was no turning back now. We found Meredith in my apartment, sitting primly on my couch like she owned it. The certification board's number glowed on her phone screen, her finger hovering over the call button. When she saw Margaret, she dropped the phone like it had burned her. No, she whispered. This isn't. You can't be here. Margaret stepped forward. Hello, Mir. Don't call me that. You lost that right when you abandoned this family. Like you abandoned me? Margaret's voice cracked. When you chose your reputation over your own sister? Meredith's hands started shaking. I was protecting us. You were protecting yourself, I cut in. Just like you're doing now. But look around, Meredith. Your perfect family? It's falling apart because of you, not me. You don't understand, she said, standing. None of you understand what I've sacrificed. We found the letter, Drew said quietly. The warning letter about yourself. You wanted someone to stop you, didn't you, Mom? Color drained from Meredith's face. I never. I didn't. Yes, you did, Margaret moved closer. Just like that night with the pills. Part of you has always been screaming for help, Mir. I just didn't know how to hear it then. Suddenly, Nolan burst through the door. Mom, what are you? He froze, seeing Margaret. Who? Your aunt, I said softly. The one your mother erased. Meredith lunged for her phone. This ends now. I'm calling the board. I'm calling everyone. I'll tell them all what kind of person you really are, Tessa. How you turn my family against me. Mom, stop. Nolan grabbed for the phone, but Meredith jerked away. In the struggle, she stumbled, catching herself on my desk. Papers scattered, and something fell, the framed photo of my father and me taken just before he died. The glass shattered. Everything stopped. I stared at the broken frame, at my father's smiling face behind spider-webbed cracks. You know what's funny? My voice sounded distant, even to myself. I actually understood you, Meredith. Losing my dad made me understand why someone might be terrified of losing their family. Why they'd do anything to hold on. Tessa. Nolan started. But this. I gestured at the chaos around us. This isn't protecting family. It's destroying it. And I'm done. What do you mean, done? Nolan asked, fear creeping into his voice. I mean I'm done fighting. Done trying to prove myself worthy of your family. I picked up the broken frame. My father taught me that love shouldn't hurt like this. It shouldn't leave you broken. You're leaving. Meredith's voice held a note of triumph. Just like Margaret. Running away when things get hard. No, Meredith. I'm not running. I'm choosing peace. And if that means walking away from someone I love because his mother would rather destroy me than accept me, I looked at Nolan. Then that's what I have to do. Tessa, please, Nolan reached for me, but I stepped back. When your mother threatened your aunt's happiness, you lost a sister, I said to Meredith. When she threatened Caroline's career, you lost your son's trust. Now you're about to lose him completely. Is your control worth that much? Meredith sank onto the couch, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. I just wanted to keep your family close? Margaret finished. Look how well that worked. I grabbed my keys and jacket. I'll be at my mom's. You all figure out what kind of family you want to be. But I won't be your casualty in the process. Where are you going? Drew asked. To pick up the pieces of my life before your mother can destroy them completely. I paused at the door. You know what's ironic? That warning letter? It wasn't just a cry for help, Meredith. It was your last chance to choose love over fear. And you failed. Again. As I walked out, I heard Meredith start to cry deep, broken sobs that spoke of decades of pain. Part of me wanted to turn back, to help heal this broken family. But sometimes I realized walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the only way to force people to face their own demons. I just hoped Nolan would understand someday why I had to go. 3 days after I walked out, Drew called. Mom's in the hospital. She took pills. The world tilted sideways. History repeating itself, just like Margaret had warned. I found myself running down sterile hospital corridors, the antiseptic smell burning my nose. Nolan stood outside the room, looking lost. She left this for you, he said, holding out an envelope. Inside was a yellowed letter dated 25 years ago. My dearest Meredith, it began. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. The shame of your father's gambling debts, the loss of our social standing. I can't bear it. Protect our family name. Never let anyone tear apart what remains of our legacy. Love, Mother. She found this after her mother's suicide, Nolan said quietly. The day before Margaret told her about Helen. Pieces clicked together, Meredith's obsession with control, her fear of scandal, her desperate need to maintain appearances. She'd been trying to prevent another family tragedy, but had nearly caused one instead. Margaret appeared from the room, eyes red. She's asking for you, Tessa. Me. Says she needs to show you something. Inside, Meredith looked small against the white sheets. On her lap lay a familiar cream-colored envelope, the warning letter I'd received months ago. I wrote it, she whispered. The morning after Nolan told me he was bringing you to dinner. I saw myself in you. Your independence, your strength. Everything I gave up to become what my mother wanted. Why warn me, then try to destroy me? Because you terrified me. Her hands trembled. You were everything I could have been if I'd been brave enough. Like Margaret was brave. I thought if I could break you, prove you were weak, you'd prove you made the right choice all those years ago? She nodded, tears falling. But watching you fight for your place in this family, watching you refuse to break, you showed me what real strength looks like. Not control. Not manipulation. Just truth. Mom, Nolan stepped forward. Why didn't you ever tell us about grandmother? About any of it? Because admitting it meant facing what I'd become. What I almost drove Margaret to. She reached for her sister's hand. What I almost did to myself. Twice. The pills, Margaret said softly. Both times you weren't trying to die. You were trying to feel something real. Meredith's facade cracked completely. I'm so tired of being perfect, of being strong, of being her. I moved to the bedside, taking her other hand. Then stop. Be yourself instead. I don't know how anymore. Yes, you do, I said firmly. You showed me when you wrote that warning letter. When part of you tried to save me from you. Can you ever forgive me? That depends. Can you forgive yourself? For Margaret? For Caroline? For everything you've done trying to be someone you're not? She looked at her sister, then her sons. I want to try. I want to be real again. Then let's start with the truth, I said, pulling out my phone. All those nasty comments on my blog? You're going to apologize. Publicly. Show everyone that Meredith Fisher isn't afraid of admitting her mistakes. A flash of the old fear crossed her face, but then, surprisingly, she laughed. You know what? That sounds liberating. Drew appeared in the doorway. The doctor says Mom can go home tomorrow. If someone stays with her. I will, Margaret said. We have 25 years to catch up on. Meredith squeezed my hand. I tried to break you because I was already broken. But you helped put this family back together instead. We're not fully fixed yet, I said, looking at Nolan. But maybe now we can try. For real this time. As I left the hospital that night, I realized sometimes the greatest act of revenge isn't destroying your enemy, it's helping them become who they were always meant to be. 6 months later, I stood in the Fisher Garden, watching Margaret and Helen help Meredith plant new roses. Different varieties this time, wild, unpredictable blooms that would transform the precise rose into something more natural, more real. Still can't believe Mom's hosting Pride Brunch next month, Drew said, joining me. Helen's already planned the menu. People can surprise you. I smiled, remembering Meredith's public apology video on my blog. It had gone viral, sparking conversations about family acceptance and mental health that reached far beyond our little drama. Nolan appeared from the house, carrying the restored photo of my father. The frame was different now, less perfect, more interesting. Like us. Mom found this in the attic, he said, handing me a small box. Inside was a pressed rose and another letter, dated the day after I'd left the hospital. Dear Tessa, it read. I spent my life trying to be the perfect mother, following a script written by my own mother's fears. You showed me that real love doesn't follow a script. It adapts, grows, sometimes blooms in unexpected places. Thank you for helping me find my voice again. Love, Meredith. She wrote it that night, Nolan explained, but was too scared to send it. And now she's learning that scary things can be beautiful too. He took my hand. Like us. We'd taken things slow after the hospital, rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. It hadn't been easy, real things rarely are. But watching Meredith laugh as Helen taught her to deadhead roses, seeing the genuine joy in her face, made everything worth it. Caroline called last week, Drew mentioned casually. After she saw Mom's video, they talked for hours. Really? Mom apologized. Actually apologized, not just that passive-aggressive sorry not sorry thing she used to do. He grinned. Caroline's coming to Pride Brunch too. Meredith approached, dirt on her designer gardening gloves, looking more alive than I'd ever seen her. Tessa, dear, would you help me with something? In her study, she opened the drawer that had once held Margaret's letters. Now it held something else, a stack of cards and letters from people who'd seen her video, sharing their own stories of family reconciliation. I answer each one, she said softly. It helps somehow. Knowing our mess of a family might help others find their way back to each other. It's not a mess anymore, I said. It's just real. Because of you. You could have destroyed me, exposed me. Instead, she touched the letters gently. You helped me destroy the person I was pretending to be. Best revenge ever, I teased. She laughed, a real laugh, not the polite society chuckle she'd once perfected. Indeed. Though I do miss my perfectly ordered rose garden sometimes. No, you don't. No, she agreed, smiling. I don't. Outside, Margaret and Helen were teaching Nolan some complicated dance steps on the lawn, while Drew recorded it all, probably for his new family history project. Not the sanitized version Meredith had once maintained, but the messy, beautiful truth. My phone buzzed, a comment notification on my latest blog post about family healing. From Caroline. Thank you for breaking the cycle. Some traditions deserve to die so new ones can bloom. I looked at Meredith, who was watching her family with tears in her eyes. Ready to go make fools of ourselves dancing? God, yes, she said, linking her arm through mine. It's about time I learned some new steps. As we joined the others on the lawn, I realized that sometimes the happy ending isn't about winning or losing, about revenge or forgiveness. Sometimes it's just about finding the courage to plant different roses and see what grows. And in the Fisher Garden, everything was blooming wild and beautiful, just like us.
The earliest memories I have are gloomy blue photos. Before I was 5, Dad went, a figure in a faded snapshot, hidden in a dusty album. Mother Anna came into a tempest looming over our small flat. She would be moaning about starting over as she hurriedly scrubbed the kitchen floor one moment. Then she would throw me into a jaw-dropping hug, her hold so strong I could not breathe. Though rare, these stifling embraces were the only signs of affection I yearned for. I was mostly just a little shadow following her around. She would dart around the flat, a worry-stricken expression on her face that seemed to have its own personality. Occasionally, when her brow furrowed and her worry lines became deeper, she would leave me downstairs with Mrs. Rodriguez. The tension in the air would crackle like static electricity when Mom eventually came back. With a disinterested sigh, she would tussle my hair in a manner that seemed more like a duty than a loving gesture. Then a glimmer of a grin would touch her face, a taste of the warmth I so badly wanted. Mom went back on the dating scene. We met Alex, a man whose eyes wrinkled at the corners as he chuckled. His movements were soft and quiet, unlike Mom's frenzied movements. In our stressful home, his generosity towards me felt out of place. I remember lying on the couch clinging to him one day after a really embarrassing event at school with Jessica Miller and her entourage, tears clouding my eyesight. Why do they pick on me all the time? I muttered into his shirt, my chest tightening with that familiar sting of loneliness. He bowed before me, a worry in his eyes that I didn't usually see in grown-ups. He wiped away a stray tear and murmured quietly, "They pick on you because they're insecure. They seek to diminish others in order to feel powerful." His statements were like a balm to my wounded soul. Something inside of me flickered with hope at that very instant. Perhaps, just possibly, things were beginning to get better. However, hope in my environment was brittle, easily broken like a butterfly. Then came Lily, a tiny bundle of joy with eyes that mirrored Mom's. She arrived a year later. Suddenly, I wasn't the center of attention anymore. All the warmth, all the affection, seemed to evaporate, replaced by a cold indifference. Mom's focus shifted entirely to Lily, leaving me to navigate the confusing world of childhood alone. Awkward braces, a permanent frizzy halo around my head, and a knot of insecurity the size of Texas tightened in my gut. It was also the age when my mom's negativity towards me bloomed into a full-blown weed garden. Take picture day at school. Mom took the day off work to fuss over Lily's pigtails and pick out the perfect sparkly dress. When it came to my turn, a sigh escaped her lips as she rummaged through my closet. Nothing decent in here," she muttered. Of course, when picture day arrived, Lily looked like a little princess, and I resembled a rumpled dandelion compared to her sunflower. Mom fawned over Lily's photo, while mine got a cursory glance and a dismissive grunt. Alex, bless his kind heart, tried to be the positive voice in my life. He'd take me shopping sometimes, helping me pick out clothes that actually fit and flattered me. One day, after a particularly frustrating day with Mom, I found myself clinging to him, the need for comfort overwhelming. "Dad," the word slipped out before I could stop it. He froze, then a pained expression crossed his face. Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes blazing. "You have one father, Alina," she hissed, her voice laced with venom. "And trust me, he deserves you." Her words stung like a slap. Alex, sensing the tension, ruffled my hair awkwardly. "Look, it's okay," he mumbled. "It's not okay," I choked out, tears welling up in my eyes. Lily, who had been watching the whole scene unfold with a smug expression, suddenly piped up. "Alina's been bad again, Daddy." She took my candy without asking. At 16, the land of first crushes, awkward dances, and a constant knot of nerves in my stomach, dating was a minefield in my house. Mom had a knack for sabotaging any potential romance before it even sprouted legs. Take Mark, for example. Tall, funny, and with a smile that could melt glaciers. He was everything a teenage girl could dream of. After weeks of nervous texts and stolen glances, I finally gathered the courage to ask him out. He said yes. Excitement bubbled in my chest, a feeling quickly replaced with dread of the thought of him meeting Mom. The night of our date, Mom went into overdrive. She fussed over Lily's bedtime story, making sure it stretched on for an eternity. When Mark finally arrived, looking nervous but sweet, Mom greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Elena never cleans her room," she announced casually, as if discussing the weather. "You might find socks and pizza boxes under that mountain of clothes." My cheeks burned like they were on fire. Mark gave a nervous chuckle, but the awkward silence stretched like a bad joke. The rest of the evening was a disaster. Mom kept making snide remarks about my weight, my taste in music, even my choice of college. By the end of the night, Mark practically ran out the door, leaving me feeling like a deflated balloon. The story repeated itself with a few unfortunate guys after that. Each time I brought someone home, Mom would turn into a master of backhanded compliments and subtle digs. My self-confidence took a nosedive, and any potential relationship fizzled out faster than a wet firecracker. At 18, the age of college applications, nervous goodbyes, and a fierce determination to break free from the suffocating grip of my childhood, senior year became my mission control. It was a strategic plan to launch myself into a world where Mom's negativity couldn't reach me. College applications became my weapon of choice. I spent hours hunched over the kitchen table, pouring my heart and dreams onto those pristine white pages. Every acceptance letter was a victory, a tiny shard of hope chipping away at the wall Mom had built around me. Of course, she didn't make it easy. When I announced my acceptance to a university across the state, her reaction was a masterpiece of passive aggression. "Oh, Alina," she sighed, shaking her head. "So far away. How will we ever see each other?" It was a question loaded with guilt, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. "We can video chat, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "Besides, there are these things called airplanes." Alex, my ever-supportive anchor, was thrilled for me. "This is amazing, Alina," he beamed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." His words were a warm hug on a cold day. He may not have been my dad by blood, but he felt more like one than the man who walked out on us all those years ago. College was a revelation. Surrounded by people who didn't know my family history, I finally felt like I could breathe. I blossomed in a sea of new experiences, challenging myself academically and forging friendships that felt genuine and supportive. At 27, the land of adulting, spreadsheets that never seemed to end, and a tiny apartment that felt like a palace compared to my cramped childhood bedroom, life for the most part was good. My job as an economist kept my brain buzzing, and David, my amazing boyfriend for the past few years, brought a warmth and laughter into my life I hadn't known before. One evening, over takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine, David dropped a bombshell. "So," he said, looking at me with that goofy grin I adored, "I think it's time we met each other's parents." My stomach lurched. Meeting David's folks was easy, a breeze. They lived in a cozy house with a backyard that smelled like freshly cut grass, and they welcomed me with open arms. His mom, Sarah, practically smothered me in hugs, and his dad, Michael, spent the entire evening cracking jokes that had me snorting into my napkin. They were warm, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. It felt normal, a word I never dared associate with family dinners in my past life. But the thought of David meeting my interesting family filled me with dread. How could I explain the years of emotional neglect, the constant jabs, the suffocating negativity? I told him everything, the fights, the tears, the way Mom had chipped away at my self-esteem for years. Lily, unsurprisingly, hadn't gotten any better. Now a master manipulator who knew exactly how to push my buttons. David listened patiently, his hand resting gently on mine. "Alina," he said firmly, "I'm marrying you, not your family. They may be baggage, but you're the prize." His words were a balm to my soul, a declaration of love that washed away years of doubt. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally build a happy family of my own. One filled with love, acceptance, and laughter. The kind of family I never had, but the kind I always deserved. My stomach twisted tighter than a pretzel as I dialed Alex's number. This was it, D-Day for breaking the news about David and the engagement. "Hey, Alina, what's up?" Alex's familiar voice boomed through the phone. "Hey, Alex," I said, taking a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you." I launched into the story, spilling the beans about David, the proposal, and the upcoming wedding. There was a comfortable silence on the other end of the line. Then a genuine laugh erupted. "Alina, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you both." His words washed over me like a warm wave, easing some of the anxiety. "Listen," he continued, "you've got to bring him over for dinner. Let me meet the guy who finally snagged you." David, bless his supportive heart, was all for it. So a few weeks later, we found ourselves pulling up to my childhood home, a place that still held a strange mix of nostalgia and dread. Mom answered the door, her face breaking into a surprised smile. "Alina, you came to visit. And who is this handsome fella?" "Mom, this is David, my fiancé," I said, offering a tight smile. David stepped forward, extending a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Turner." Mom beamed, shaking his hand a little too enthusiastically. "The pleasure's all mine, dear. So David, what do you do for a living?" David, oblivious to the undercurrent of Mom's question, launched into a detailed explanation of his work as a director at a large company. Alex, ever the smooth operator, chimed in with jokes and stories, keeping the conversation flowing. Lily, of course, wasn't about to be outdone. She spent the entire meal batting her eyelashes at David, interrupting our conversations to pepper him with questions about his job and hobbies. Mom, ever the doting mother, fawned over Lily's every word, a stark contrast to the thinly veiled barbs she kept throwing my way. "Alina, honey," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "you really should take some fashion tips from Lily. That dress you're wearing, well, it's not exactly flattering." David, thankfully, seemed oblivious to the digs, but I knew exactly what Mom was doing. She was suddenly putting me down, making me feel insecure right in front of my fiancé. The entire dinner felt like a twisted performance, a play where I was constantly reminded of how I wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough. By the time dessert rolled around, I was ready to run screaming. As soon as it was polite, we made our excuses and left. The moment we were safely buckled into the car, David let out a long sigh. "Your mom, she's a character, isn't she?" he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Yeah," I muttered, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "She can be." He squeezed my hand gently. But hey, we made it through dinner. He was right, we had, and even with Mom's negativity hanging in the air like a bad smell, the simple act of holding David's hand filled me with a sense of strength and purpose. This was my future, a future I was building with him, not with my dysfunctional family. The warm glow of post-dinner satisfaction lingered in the air as David and I curled up on the couch, poring over wedding magazines. We envisioned a small, intimate ceremony in a charming vineyard, surrounded by the people who loved and supported us. It was perfect. Then the next morning, the dream shattered into a million pieces. My phone buzzed with David's name. His usual cheerful ringtone was replaced by a ringing that sent a shiver down my spine. "Alina," he said, his voice tight with a mix of anger and disbelief. "We have a problem." My stomach lurched. "What's wrong?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "Your mom." The blood drained from my face. What did she do this time? David explained, his words hitting me like punches. Mom, the ever-reliable manipulator, had somehow unearthed his work phone number. Instead of a congratulatory call, she'd unleashed a verbal tirade that would make a sailor blush. Apparently, in her twisted world, I was the epitome of inadequacy, ugly, dull, and lacking any social graces. It didn't stop there. She'd even dragged Dad into it, dredging up his abandonment years ago like a weapon. But the piece de resistance? She suggested David ditch me and turn his sights on Lily, claiming my younger sister was the epitome of beauty and brains. Fury boiled up inside me, a hot, venomous rage. How dare she try to sabotage my happiness yet again? David, bless his heart, was furious too, but he channeled his anger into something unexpected. A plan, a crazy, audacious plan that was equal parts risky and thrilling. "We expose her," he said, his jaw clenched. "We set a trap." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. David would call Mom back, pretend to be swayed by her words, and arrange a meeting to discuss this ludicrous proposal. His goal was to record the entire conversation on his phone. David made the call, his voice smooth and convincing. Mom, completely oblivious to the web she was about to walk into, readily agreed to meet him for coffee. A nervous laugh bubbled up from my chest. This was it. Operation Momzilla Takedown was a go. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let my mother dictate my future any longer. This time, the tables were turning, and I was ready to play for keeps. I decided to attend their meeting. The thought of confronting Mom, especially disguised as a stranger, sent shivers down my spine. But the anger simmering inside me, the anger at her constant negativity and her attempt to sabotage my happiness, was a powerful motivator. Back in my comfy jeans and a worn-out t-shirt, I slipped into a corner booth at a bustling cafe across the street from our designated meeting spot. Thick black glasses perched on my nose completed the disguise, transforming me into a nondescript observer. Butterflies danced a frenetic jig in my stomach as I watched Mom sashay into the cafe, a triumphant smile plastered on her face. She spotted David at the pre-arranged table in a private room, her smile widening further. This was it. Operation Momzilla Takedown was officially underway. David, bless his tech-savvy heart, had discreetly turned on the dictaphone on his phone. Me, I heard their entire conversation in the immediate vicinity. Their conversation started innocently enough, with David playing the part of the interested suitor. Then Mom, completely ignoring his phone, launched into her diatribe. "You know, David," she began, leaning in conspiratorially, "between you and me, Alina just isn't wife material." My blood ran cold. The woman who was supposed to be my mother, the woman who was supposed to love and support me, was bad-mouthing me to a complete stranger. "She's, well, a bit simple," Mom continued, her voice laced with fake sympathy. "Not very pretty either, if you know what I mean." David, to his credit, kept his face impassive, simply nodding along and murmuring non-committal phrases. Inside, I knew he must be fuming. "But Lily..." Mom's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Now that's a girl with potential, smart, beautiful, knows how to handle herself in society." The audacity of it all. Lily, with her airhead personality and complete lack of work ethic, was apparently the epitome of elegance and intelligence according to Mom. The conversation continued, a masterclass in manipulation and deceit. Blinded by her own delusions, Mom even confessed to never loving my stepfather, claiming she'd only married him for his money. The woman had no shame. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mom stood up, her face radiating self-satisfaction. "Well, David, it was lovely meeting you." "Think about what I said," she purred, patting his hand with a perfectly manicured nail as she walked out of the cafe. I could only shake my head in disbelief. "So what now?" I asked, my voice tight. David pulled me into a hug, his touch a source of comfort amidst the swirling storm of emotions. "Now," he said, his voice firm, "we expose her." The air crackled with tension as I walked into my childhood home that weekend. Mom's smile was a mile wide, radiating a smugness that set my teeth on edge. "Elena, honey, you won't believe it," she gushed, the words tumbling out before I even had a chance to say hello. "What's that, Mom?" I asked, already bracing myself for a bombshell. "David," she declared, her voice dripping with sickening satisfaction, "decided to see reason. He's leaving you and marrying Lily." My heart did a little stutter, but I forced a smile. "That's great, Mom. Really happy for them." My stepdad, bless his perpetually confused soul, cleared his throat. "But I thought they were getting married." Lily, who had been lounging on the couch like a pampered cat, snorted a laugh. "Apparently not, Dad. Alina just wasn't good enough for him." Shocker. I ignored her snide remark, my eyes locked on Mom's triumphant face. It was showtime. "Actually, Mom," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "David's right here." Just then, David walked in, a sleek grin plastered on his face. His presence sent a collective gasp echoing through the room. "Hi, everyone," he said, his voice smiling. Just in time for a little family fun. He pulled out his phone and pressed play. The room fell silent as Mom's voice, dripping with malice, filled the air. The conversation from the cafe played in its entirety. Her diatribe about me, her praise for Lily, the shocking confession about my stepfather. The color drained from Mom's face with each passing sentence. Stepdad turned a shade of pale, his jaw slack with disbelief. As for Lily, her bravado crumbled, replaced by a terrified whimper. When the recording ended, a deathly silence descended upon the room. Then my stepfather exploded. "You lying snake." He roared, his voice shaking with fury. "You married me for money all these years." Mom, for the first time in my life, looked genuinely lost. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they were overshadowed by the storm brewing in my stepfather's face. "I want a divorce," he declared, his voice thick with anger. "Get a lawyer." The room imploded. Mom and Lily burst into tears. There were wails, a cacophony of misery and self-pity. David, bless his heart, looked as comfortable as a fish out of water, caught in a hurricane. Amidst the chaos, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth, ugly and raw, was finally out in the open. The years of unspoken hurt, the manipulation, the lies, it all spilled out, shattering the facade of our dysfunctional family. The following weeks were a blur of tear-choked sobs from my stepdad and icy stares from Lily whenever our paths crossed at the grocery store. Mom, the architect of this whole mess, retreated into a self-imposed social media blackout. As for me, I felt strangely hollow. The anger that had fueled me for so long was gone, leaving a gaping hole that needed filling. One sunny afternoon, David found me curled up on the couch, mindlessly flipping through wedding magazines that now seemed like dusty relics from a bygone era. "Hey," he said, his voice laced with concern. "You all right?" I managed a weak smile. "Yeah, just thinking. Everything just feels so different." He squeezed onto the couch beside me, pulling me into a hug. "It is," he admitted. "But hey, different can be good. A chance to start fresh, you know." His words were a gentle nudge in the right direction. Maybe he was right. Maybe the mom-shaped void in my life could be filled with something new, something exciting. A spark ignited in my chest. "So," I said, a mischievous glint in my eyes, "what do you say we do something crazy?" David's eyebrows shot up. "Crazy? Like what?" "How about a road trip?" I suggested, a grin spreading across my face. Just us, a map, and the open road. No expectations, no timelines, just pure adventure. "You had me on a road trip," he declared. And so our plans took a sharp turn. The meticulously planned vineyard ceremony morphed into a spontaneous cross-country adventure. We packed a beat-up camper van with essentials, copious snacks, a killer playlist, and a well-worn copy of On the Road, and hit the road with no destination in mind, only the promise of new experiences and shared memories. Fast forward a year, and David and I were standing at the altar, exchanging vows under a canopy of fragrant flowers. It wasn't the elaborate ceremony I'd once envisioned, but it was perfect. My recently divorced and distant from Lily's stepdad, rather than my disapproving mother, was the one who escorted me down the aisle. His eyes were filled with regretful and proud tears. "You know, kiddo, I always knew you'd find your happily ever after," he whispered as he gripped my hand. After the wedding, everything fell into a cozy routine. Together, David and I created a life that was full of love, laughing, and the odd exciting road trip. My stepdad started coming around frequently, telling us tales of his adventures, and making not-so-subtle suggestions that he wanted to be a grandpa. "Don't worry, you'll be the best grandpa ever," I'd respond, laughing. Andrew and I met while he was employed by my father, and that is how we got married. Andrew and I made the decision for me to stay at home after the wedding so I could pursue my interests in knitting and sewing. Every winter, I loved crafting scarves and gloves for him. I worked hard to perfect my craft until he would proudly compare them to ones from the shop. This support stoked my enthusiasm, and I dreamed of our future child joining me in this pastime, a dream that made us both happy. I've been married to Andrew for 6 years. Despite not having children, we have contentment in our relationship. It means the world to me that Andrew attempts to make time for us on his days off, even with his hectic career. That being said, there are times when his art makes me feel a little alone. Our peaceful existence was appended 3 years ago when I unexpectedly passed out at home from vertigo. I was hurried to the hospital by Andrew. When I woke up, I heard him talking to the doctor about my situation. I would have to deal with it for the rest of my life because it was so serious. Long hospital stays were expected, even if the incident wasn't immediately life-threatening due to the likelihood of future occurrences. I was nervous, but Andrew was there to comfort me. I was thinking about all the scarves and gloves I had knitted and had thrown away during one of these hospital stays when Andrew said, maybe without thinking, "I married you because you're the boss's daughter." His remarks cut me profoundly and made me realize something. It was obvious that we needed to talk about this in order for me to know how you really felt and to find a way to truly enjoy our time together, as we had originally intended when we first got married. Despite his reassurances, Andrew's comforting words during my hospital stay only partially eased my concerns. He held my hand, telling me not to worry and promising to visit whenever he could take time off from work. With him by my side, I felt a flicker of hope that everything might turn out okay, even though there were no guarantees. True to his word, Andrew initially visited almost every day. He would check on me, hold my hand, and even bring my favorite sewing tools to help me pass the time. Teaching him to sew became a delightful way to while away the hours, making the monotony of hospital life bearable. We chatted about daily trivialities and stitched together, enjoying each other's company. However, after about a year, these visits became less frequent. Andrew's presence dwindled from daily to only every few weeks. I assumed he was swamped with work and continued my sewing, focusing on a scarf I planned to give him during his next visit. Anticipating my discharge by the year's end, I also started knitting gloves to accompany the scarf, pouring all my affection and longing into each stitch. The day he finally showed up again, I eagerly presented him with the gloves, only to be met with a cold stare. "Are you still making these? It's annoying," he said bluntly, pushing the scarf I had made, still pristine and untouched, back into my hands along with divorce papers. His words cut deeper than any physical pain could. Andrew explained that he couldn't continue taking care of me, suggesting it was time for us to part ways. The divorce papers were already signed by him, signaling the end of our journey together. Even though I had sensed a change in our relationship ever since his visits became sporadic, facing the reality was heart-wrenching. I had always tried to convince myself that he was merely caught up with work, but the Andrew I knew, the kind, attentive one, wouldn't have let work stop him from supporting me. When he stopped coming without any explanation, I knew something was amiss. When I calmly asked him why he wanted a divorce, it wasn't because I was desperately clinging to our relationship. I realized I might have become a burden to him, and if the compassionate Andrew I married truly wanted this, I was ready to let go. This acceptance was painful but necessary, as it was clear the life we once dreamed of sharing was no longer possible. As Andrew's visits became sparse, I found myself grappling with the realization that the partnership he once promised seemed a distant memory. When I finally mustered the courage to ask him why he had changed so drastically, his response was shockingly blunt. "Isn't it obvious? Ever since I married you, it's been one problem after another. I'm so tired of those scarves and gloves you make every year. Honestly, I only married you because your dad was my boss." He confessed with a harsh laugh that felt like a slap. His words revealed a deep-seated resentment towards the simple joys I cherished in our life together, joys that he now mocked as trivial and embarrassing. As Andrew vented his frustrations, I couldn't help but notice the luxurious, finely made scarf wrapped around his neck, a scarf I had not crafted. It dawned on me that perhaps he had never appreciated any of the gifts I had lovingly made. Maybe they had always been nothing more than an annoyance to him, a realization that stung deeply. After I fell ill and my father retired, it became painfully clear that Andrew no longer felt the need to maintain the facade of a caring husband. During the first year of my illness, he had diligently visited, possibly to preserve his image at work, where he was often lauded for his dedication to his sick wife. This facade of a supportive spouse seemed to benefit him professionally, enhancing his reputation among colleagues. When I confronted him about this, pointing out how his visits seemed more about maintaining his image than genuine concern, Andrew was momentarily taken aback. He then sheepishly admitted that my condition had indeed made things easier for him at work. This candid acknowledgement confirmed my suspicions. To Andrew, my worth had been tied not to our shared life or the love I thought we had, but rather to how my situation could serve his interests. This harsh reality was a turning point, helping me see the vast gap between the life we had promised each other and the one we were living. Throughout my illness, Andrew had seemingly capitalized on the sympathy and goodwill of others. He confessed quite candidly how mentioning my condition at work garnered him extra praise for his supposed dedication, and readily granted him breaks whenever he needed them. If I worked late, everyone praised me for being so dedicated. And if I needed a break, all I had to say was my wife is sick. he explained without a trace of remorse. His tone was almost boastful as he added that my illness had inadvertently paved the way for his upcoming promotion, dismissing his colleagues as fools who were easily manipulated by his story. As he spoke, I saw not the man I had loved, but a stranger with a cruel smile revealing his true nature. Resigned and realizing the extent of his deceit, I quietly accepted the reality of our situation. Well, if my illness was useful to you, then that's something we probably won't see each other again. So take care, I said calmly, handing him the divorce papers. He barely glanced at them before taking them and leaving quickly, marking the end of our marriage. After he left, the weight of it all came crashing down, and I cried alone. Soon after, I was discharged from the hospital and returned to my parents' home. My father was furious when he learned how Andrew had exploited my condition for his gain. "I never expected him to act like this," he exclaimed, shocked by Andrew's actions. By then, however, I had come to terms with the end of our marriage and reassured my father, telling him that I wished to stay with them for a while. My parents were supportive, encouraging me to do whatever made me happy, which at that moment meant being with family. Before moving back with my parents permanently, I decided to visit our old house, only to discover that the front door lock was broken. Confused, we rang the doorbell and were greeted by a stranger. He informed us that he had bought the house a few months earlier and was now living there with his family. Although my parents were outraged, I chose not to cause any trouble for the new residents and left quietly. Unable to let go of the matter, I called Andrew to confront him about the house. He nonchalantly confirmed, "Yeah, I sold it while you were in the hospital, keeping the money as my compensation. It was my house originally." His response was yet another blow, but by then I had already braced myself for his selfish actions and focused on rebuilding my life without him. Andrew's indifferent tone, as he mentioned the sale of our house, left me deeply sighing. I had only just found out that he had sold our home about a year ago, around the same time his visits and concern for me began to wane. It was shocking to learn he had made such a significant decision without even a discussion, especially since we were still technically married and had yet to finalize the division of our assets. Though the divorce papers were signed, we had planned to meet the following week to settle these matters, but Andrew had preemptively acted on his own, which was astounding. When I confronted him over the phone, trying to maintain my composure, I told him, "You didn't understand anything." His response was a confused, "What do you mean?" I simply replied, "I'll explain next week," and hung up, turning to my concerned parents. I managed to smile and asked my father for a favor. I outlined my plans and requested his help to prepare everything. "I've already prepared all the necessary documents. There's not much time before our meeting next week, but we'll manage," my father assured me with a slightly worried smile. As my father, he likely felt a mix of guilt for having introduced me to Andrew and anger towards him. His determination to support me was palpable, and I was grateful for it. As the day of the meeting approached, I found myself unexpectedly smiling at the thought of Andrew's reaction to the preparations we were making. We decided to hold the meeting at my parents' house. My parents and I sat on one side, facing Andrew across from us. Despite knowing how much pain the divorce had caused my parents, Andrew appeared utterly indifferent, even displaying a slight smirk at times. His demeanor was not just unapologetic, but outright disrespectful and arrogant, which only solidified my resolve. At that moment, seated beside my parents, I felt the weight of the injustice he had done to me, but also a sense of empowerment from the support of my family as we prepared to face him together. As the discussion unfolded, I maintained a calm demeanor, assuring Andrew I didn't plan to ask for too much. He attempted to appear generous, stating that the money from selling the house would suffice. This claim visibly angered my father, but I gently touched his hand to soothe him, signaling that we had the upper hand in this discussion, and there was no need to escalate our emotions. Before we proceed, there's something important we need to address, I said. My father handed me a document, and I held it out for my husband to see. The house was indeed in your name, but the land it stands on belongs to my father, who holds the title, I explained calmly. My husband's face showed a slight frown. So what? The house was still mine. No one can complain. Do you think this gives you a way to get back at me? He chuckled dismissively. It's true you legally sold the house, I acknowledged. However, since the land is still owned by my father, this poses a significant issue for the family who purchased the house. You sold the house, yes, but as the landowner, my father could theoretically demand rent from the family currently living there. Wouldn't that cause them considerable trouble? I paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. We're not planning to take that step. However, we can't simply relinquish our rights to the land without compensation. We plan to offer the family the opportunity to purchase the land. We won't force them out or charge rent monthly, but it would be problematic if they refuse to buy, I explained further. Originally, my father intended this land as a gift for us to build our life on, not to be sold off to strangers without consideration. If the family who bought the house refuses to purchase the land, they might even sue you, misled into thinking they had full ownership of their new home. Imagine their frustration, thinking they had bought their dream home only to find out about additional unexpected expenses. With the ownership of the land confirmed, we promptly visited the family who had bought the house to discuss these issues and find a fair resolution. This approach not only protected my family's interests, but also showed consideration for the unwitting buyers, aiming to prevent further conflict and distress. When we laid out the situation to the new homeowners, they were quite understanding but firm. They recognized that any legal complications arising from the sale would fall on the seller, my husband, Andrew. They even mentioned the possibility of suing him if we couldn't reach a satisfactory agreement. Observing Andrew's pale face, I could tell he grasped the gravity of what was at stake. He could face severe financial repercussions. In a shaky voice, he asked, "What should I do?" I responded with a slight smile. The family could buy the land from us, which would settle everything smoothly. However, you'll need to cover the cost. Once they own both the house and the land, all current issues will be resolved. I continued explaining the complications further. Given that they were unaware of the land's full value when they purchased the house, they might demand compensation from you. That decision is theirs to make. Also, the land is in a prime location, potentially worth more than the house itself. Even if you sold all your assets, it might not cover the costs. Alternatively, you could choose to buy back the house and cover the cost of the land along with a relocation fee for the family. This would return both the house and land to your possession, and you could attempt to resell them. Though after paying the relocation fee, any profit would likely be minimal. I paused to let the information sink in before addressing another point. Regarding alimony, your actions have caused me considerable emotional distress. I intend to seek compensation for that, so keep that in mind. You've used me as a pawn for your career ambitions, and now that I see this clearly, I'm disgusted by everything you've done. I plan to pursue damages for the emotional distress it's caused me. While evidence may be limited and a victory uncertain, discussing this matter is crucial given your current predicament. My father, though retired, chimed in with a stern tone. I still have many connections from my career. I've been in touch with former colleagues who have shared your opinions and actions regarding my daughter. You're being looked down upon by everyone, Andrew, he shared with a cheerfully grim smile. This finally seemed to make Andrew realize the seriousness of his situation. The combined pressure of potential legal and financial consequences, coupled with the loss of his professional reputation, cornered Andrew, forcing him to face these harsh realities head-on. The status he had built at work using me as a stepping stone was now crumbling around him. Sitting confidently across from Andrew, I clasped my hands together, my smile radiant, and unlike any he had seen from me before, especially since our separation. "Let's discuss what happens next," I began, my voice steady and assured. Andrew, caught up in the gravity of the situation, managed only a strained laugh, his eyes brimming with tears. As the negotiations unfolded, it was clear that the advantage was mine. Andrew agreed to pay alimony and also to compensate for the land where our house once stood. We later explained this arrangement to the family who had bought the house, ensuring they were treated fairly and understood the new terms. Everyone came out ahead in the end, with the exception of Andrew, who ended up losing everything. The whispers that my father had quietly started to circulate about his organization increased his losses, damaged his reputation, and eliminated any prospects of advancement. The more these rumors spread, the more alone Andrew got, and eventually he resigned from the company, a decision my father subsequently told me about. One could be tempted to see all of this as karma. The profits Andrew believed he had made by exploitation turned out to be fleeting and crumbled under the force of his deeds. I found comfort and a new purpose in teaching sewing classes now that I'm back at my parents' house. Even though only a few local ladies and kids show up for my classes, I feel incredibly happy because sharing my skills with others makes me feel happy. This unexpected turn of events in my life has taught me that I can still contribute my passion and experience in ways that benefit those around me and myself, even if I choose not to become a mother, a dream I once held with Andrew. More than anything else, this has shown me the resiliency of the human spirit and the surprising routes to happiness. My name is Sandra, and I currently live in a small annex attached to my in-laws' home. I reside there with my husband, Willie, while I occupy the annex alone. Willie resides in the main house with his parents. This annex, initially a modest project by Willie's grandfather intended as a personal retreat, has been transformed into a livable space about the size of a standard room, thanks to my efforts. I had lived in a regular apartment for the first 4 years of our marriage. However, his parents, who are very fond of him, unexpectedly expressed a wish for him to return home. Moved by his duty as a son and touched by his parents' longing, complete with tears and hugs, Willie decided to move back in with them. This left me somewhat surprised and overwhelmed by their emotional display. Willie and I first met at work, where he started as my subordinate, joining the company midway through his career. We dated for 4 years while he lived at his parents' home, which seemed to have deepened a sense of nostalgia and homesickness for him and his parents. Despite living on his own after our marriage, Willie's upbringing, characterized by considerable pampering and little involvement in household tasks, seemed to draw him back to the familiarity and comfort of his parental home. When I suggested we share the household chores, Willie seemed hesitant and admitted he had never really been involved in such tasks before. Despite my hopes to equally divide the responsibilities, Willie had never even considered taking part in them. I noticed a recurring pattern. Every time I tried to get him involved, he would feign interest momentarily, then quickly lose enthusiasm and conclude, "This isn't for me, Sandra. You're better at it. You should just keep doing it." Both of us were working full-time, but as I held a higher position at my job, I felt a stronger urge to distribute the domestic duties. Yet trying to get Willie to contribute often ended up being more exhausting than just doing everything myself. Eventually, I found it simpler to manage all the tasks on my own. The dynamic in our home began to change when I switched to working remotely. Willie, initially surprised to see me at home every day, seemed to adjust to the new arrangement, or so I believed. Over time, however, it became clear that he hadn't fully understood what my working from home entailed. A few years into my remote work, Willie's parents made a sudden visit to our apartment, expressing their desire to live closer to him. Witnessing their emotional reunion made me feel isolated and confused. Eventually, respecting Will's desire to be closer to his parents, we decided to move into their house. Throughout our relationship, Willie consistently chose locations near his parents, whether it was for renting an apartment or selecting a job for me. Since I was working remotely, the location had become irrelevant. But Willie's decisions often meant we had to uproot ourselves and even quit our jobs. Upon moving into his parents' home, Willie's mother warmly expressed her gratitude, saying, "Thank you for taking care of Willie all this time. From now on, I will take good care of him, Sandra. Please handle everything else." Initially, I thought this meant I'd be relieved from the daily chores related to Willie, but I soon realized her true intentions were quite different. My mother-in-law took it upon herself to cater to Willie's specific needs. She prepared special meals just for him, washed and ironed only his clothes, kept his shoes and belongings pristine, and purchased various personal items exclusively for him. Meanwhile, all other household chores, including cooking and laundry for Willie's parents and myself, were now my responsibility. Despite my full-time job commitments, I found myself burdened with not only managing our daily tasks, but also maintaining the cleanliness of the larger family home. This new arrangement left me feeling disheartened. Although this living situation seemed to bring joy to Willie and his parents, it offered no apparent benefits to me. My responsibilities seemed to have multiplied. During one cleaning session, my father-in-law came to me with a hesitant request. He looked apologetic as he said, "Sandra, I have a favor to ask. Could you contribute some money?" Confused, I asked him to explain further. He shared his difficulty in asking Willie to contribute financially, adding, "Willie has worked hard, and it feels challenging to ask him for financial contributions." This revelation added to the complexity of our living dynamics, highlighting the uneven distribution of both chores and financial responsibilities. Willie and I had previously agreed to share expenses, such as our apartment rent and other living costs. However, during our shopping trips, Willie often persuaded me to pay for various items, including non-essential ingredients, alcohol, clothes, and accessories. When I expressed reluctance, he would react childishly, accusing me of being stingy. Despite these financial disagreements, I took some comfort in the fact that, aside from these issues, Willie didn't interfere much with my everyday life. This semblance of peace changed dramatically when we began living together at his parents' house. Unlike Willie, his mother actively disrupted my routine. She consistently interrupted my work from home, insisting that I prioritize household chores over my professional duties. She would even barge into my room and tug on my clothing, making it exceedingly difficult for me to concentrate on my tasks. Feeling frustrated, I brought up the issue with Willie, half expecting him to side with his mother. To my surprise, Willie listened attentively and promised to speak with her about the interruptions. I was hopeful for a compromise that would address both our needs. Little did I know that Willie's idea of a compromise was quite different from what I envisioned. It involved relocating me to the annex, a separate structure on their property, suggesting a new level of separation rather than integration. One day, somewhat jokingly, I approached Willie with a question about the annex, asking if I could demolish it and build a new house in its place. To my astonishment, he casually responded, You can even demolish it and build a new house if you want. This casual remark opened up unexpected possibilities for our living arrangement, suggesting a level of autonomy I hadn't anticipated. Taking Will's words to heart, I promptly began remodeling the annex to suit my tastes. As I cleaned, renovated, and changed the wallpapers, I noticed that Willie never once appeared to check on the progress. As I transformed the space, it became clear that Willie had no intention of living in the remodeled annex with me. This realization struck me hard. Within the family living trio, I was the outsider. There were times when I found myself alone at home when they would go out to a barbecue restaurant, or during times I had to work late and missed communal meals. These outings, often orchestrated by Willie's mother, seemed deliberately planned. It appeared she might have been pushing for my exclusion, perhaps hoping I would leave her son. Despite these dynamics, Willie had given me complete freedom with the annex, and I seized this opportunity to make the space truly my own. I threw myself into DIY projects, installing new shelves, and personalizing every corner. Interestingly, after I moved out, neither Willie nor his parents ever visited the annex. They must have been aware of the renovations, yet they showed no interest in my activities, reinforcing the feeling that I was no longer considered part of the family. Living away from the main house, especially without the constant presence of Willie's mother, I began to relish my newfound independence. It felt almost like living alone, which was surprisingly liberating. I found solace in the fact that residing in the annex kept her from interfering with my work. During the renovation, I even installed new locks and enhanced the security further, marking the annex as my sanctuary away from the family dynamics. I made sure that no one, not even Willie or his parents, could enter the annex without my permission. This new level of privacy made me reconsider whether this separation might be a blessing in disguise. However, it seemed my mother-in-law had already sensed my growing detachment and was not about to let me find peace easily. No longer able to endure her behavior, I found myself at a crossroads, contemplating my next steps. As I settled into the renovated annex, my mother-in-law's desperation to drive me away became increasingly evident. Her subtle harassment began with minor annoyances, like leaving trash in front of my cabin on garbage day, rather than at the collection site. Sometimes she would host barbecues in the garden, deliberately omitting me from the guest list while ensuring the tantalizing smell of grilled meat wafted my way. Despite these efforts, I couldn't help but smile at the futility of her attempts to push me out. Then one day, she summoned me to the main house under the pretense of offering leftover meat and potatoes. Sensing there was more to her invitation, I went along. Upon my arrival, I found her alone in the living room. With a dramatic flourish, she placed a single piece of paper on the table, a divorce paper. It was evident that her real motive was to force this document upon me, knowing that if she instructed Willie to proceed with it, he would comply without question. All that was left was for me to agree, and Willie and I could be officially divorced by simply submitting the paper to the city court. With a smug expression, his mother declared, "Isn't it about time you gave up? There's no reason for you and Willie to stay married anymore. Get out, you freeloading unemployed woman." I was taken aback by her audacity, but her certainty only fueled my resolve. Excited by the prospect of freedom, I eagerly grabbed the divorce paper, exclaiming, "I'm going to the city court right now." "Thank you so much." My mother-in-law, who had likely expected me to resist the divorce, was left dumbfounded by my unexpected enthusiasm. After submitting the divorce papers at the city court, I wasted no time packing my belongings. Feeling it was necessary to inform Willie's mother about the finalized divorce, I headed to the main house. There, I informed her that the process had been successful. Regarding the cabin I had renovated, I told her I would leave it as it was, and she was free to demolish it or use it as she pleased. My positive attitude about leaving seemed to surprise even my mother-in-law, who, despite seeming happy about my departure, wished me luck on the day I left. Willie and his father, seemingly realizing I was truly leaving, expressed their concern. "Are you going? What will we do without Sandra?" they asked. I smiled and thanked them for letting me use the cabin. I explained that since there was no point in staying married anymore, and now that we were divorced, it was time for me to move on. As I organized my belongings, I completed my move to a luxury apartment, a change I had been planning for some time. Not long after settling into my new apartment, my mother-in-law called me. Her tone was awkward as she started, "Sandra." Cheerfully answering my mother-in-law's call, I opened with a light-hearted inquiry. "What's up? How's everything going with the cabin I'm currently using?" She shifted gears to a more serious topic, mentioning finances. Specifically, she brought up that Willie had informed her I was giving his father $5,000 a month. Confirming her statement, I explained that contrary to her previous accusations of me being an unemployed freeloader, I was indeed gainfully employed. Her surprise was evident over the phone. She had been under the impression that I had left my job entirely. I quickly set the record straight, clarifying that I hadn't just left my previous job, but had moved on to become the president of a new company. This company, I elaborated, was pioneering a remote work system, positioning itself at the forefront of modern work environments. Her reaction was a mix of disbelief and confusion, prompting a sigh from me. It dawned on me that Willie, too, was in the dark about my professional ascent, which highlighted the distance between us, not just physically, but in our perceptions of each other. Since moving in with his parents, it became clear he never fully embraced his role as a husband. She then inquired about my earnings, curious if my new role had also boosted my income. Offhandedly, I mentioned that it was roughly around $3 million. This figure was admittedly an exaggeration, more of a simplification to avoid delving into the complexities of my actual earnings. Seizing on this, she shifted the conversation. "With that much money, could you lend us some? Your father-in-law was laid off, and he kept it hidden. We've been managing somehow with the $5,000 you've been giving us, and neither Willie nor I were aware of his job loss." This revelation brought clarity to a previous conversation I had with my father-in-law, where he mentioned how pitiful it felt to ask his son for money. I now understood that his earlier words were a facade, likely a strategic move to elicit financial support from me, banking on the assumption that my superior professional position implied substantial wealth. This maneuver, while cunning, painted a clearer picture of the financial dynamics within Willie's family and their expectations of me. At our former company, they subtly maneuvered to extract $5,000 a month from me under the guise of shared expenses. In hindsight, I didn't mind too much at the time because it allowed me to live peacefully in the quiet cabin. But now, being divorced from Willie, I saw no ties that bound me to his family anymore. When I mentioned this disconnect, my mother-in-law urgently pleaded, "That's not true. To me and Willie, you're still family. Please come back to us." I immediately declined, fully aware of the potential to be exploited once more. Re-entering a relationship with Willie offered no benefits. We were now strangers, and it was uncomfortable for them to still claim me as family, especially since they were the ones who pushed me out originally. I'm really enjoying my life on my own now. It feels much the same as when I was married, mostly living alone. The difference is that back then, I didn't spend money on myself, and $5,000 was siphoned from me every month. I much prefer my current life. With a firm goodbye, I ended the call without hesitation, puzzled as to why they thought I would ever return. For my mother-in-law, it must have been a last-ditch effort. In reality, Willie's salary wasn't impressive, and he had a consistent habit of avoiding responsibilities, often saying, "I can't do it," and passing tasks on to others. This trait, prevalent in both our personal and professional lives, rendered him unreliable, and he remained a regular employee without any salary advancements. Furthermore, with his father laid off and his mother a housewife, they struggled to maintain their large house and eventually had to sell it. Now all three of them are living in the cabin I renovated. While it's just right for one person, it must be quite cramped and uncomfortable for three. Since then, I haven't given them much thought and continue to live my life peacefully, savoring the solitude and freedom that come with my new independence. I married into an affluent family and am now content with my life. Mason's strong voice broke through my composure as he made fun of my obviously modest existence while we sat in the hotel lobby. He made fun of me by bragging about his new bride, who happens to be the president of Goldsmith Enterprises' daughter. The air filled with Mason's proud chuckle, but my attention was drawn to Goldsmith Enterprises' comment. I knew that name but couldn't quite place it at first. Then it clicked. Mason continued to gloat, unaware of the humor I found in his boasting. My name is Patricia, and I'm 37, living contentedly with my husband Mason. I work in my family's real estate business, handling mostly administrative duties while my father, the president, oversees major strategies. As an only child, I'm expected to one day lead the company. Despite the looming responsibility, I maintain a careful balance between my personal and professional life, especially around Mason. He completed high school and works for a moving company, a demanding job that I respect. To avoid making him feel inadequate, I rarely discuss my university degree or my anticipated future as president of the company. Mason and I met through a mutual friend during college. After my friend's move was handled by Mason's company, she introduced us. Initially, Mason was interested in her, but after she turned him down, we got to know each other. His easygoing nature complemented my meticulousness, and our relationship flourished. We married in our late 20s after a brief courtship. Our marriage has been smooth, bolstered by the warm acceptance of Mason's parents, a refreshing contrast to the typical in-law challenges some of my friends face. Despite Mason's demanding job often keeping him out until late and physically exhausting him, he remained committed to our marriage. Even on his toughest days, he'd express gratitude as I waited up to share dinner with him. I felt fortunate to have such a devoted husband. But after a year of marriage, our peaceful life began to show signs of strain. One night, as we settled into bed, Mason unexpectedly brought up the topic of having children. His tone was tinged with irritation, catching me off guard. I had thought about starting a family too, and though we weren't actively trying, I believed it would happen naturally with time. I reassured him it's only been a year. There's no rush. I wanted children, but I knew stressing about it wouldn't help. To calm the situation, I adopted a relaxed demeanor, but Mason, more assertive than usual, quoted statistics. There's about a 90% chance of conceiving within a year for couples not using contraception. Not well versed in such specifics, that figure sounded surprisingly high to me. If you're concerned, maybe we should both get tested, I suggested, thinking it wise to address any potential issues together. However, Mason's reaction was unexpectedly harsh. "What are you implying? That it's my fault?" He retorted, his tone filled with contempt. It was the first time he'd spoken to me this way. I hadn't accused him of anything. I merely suggested a joint approach to find clarity. Yet Mason concluded I was blaming him and added, "It's definitely the woman's fault," as if to underline that I was the problem. I wanted to respond but was too shaken, barely managing to reply, "Of course, so just you get tested. I'm too busy with work. I have a job too, you know. You're just coasting along in your dad's company," he snapped, his words stinging. I never just coasted, although my role involved many administrative tasks. I was actively learning management skills from my father in preparation to lead the company someday. That night, any attempt at discussion was met with curt replies, and we fell asleep with our backs turned in silence, a heavy air hanging between us. From then on, Mason's attitude toward me shifted drastically. Returning home late one evening, after a discussion about the future with my father, I found Mason irate over dinner. "I'm sorry, I just got home 15 minutes ago. I'll start cooking now. Just wait a little, please," I hurriedly explained, but Mason dismissed it. That's typical of a small company's boss's daughter. He didn't realize the scale of my father's business, a significant real estate company with hundreds of employees. His assumptions and the increasing bitterness made navigating our daily lives more challenging, casting a shadow over what had once been a loving and supportive relationship. Arguing seemed pointless as I hurried to the kitchen, promising Mason I'd cook immediately. "Have a drink and relax while you wait," I suggested, knowing how alcohol seemed to soothe him. It saddened me that our relationship had come to rely on his evening drinks to avoid tension. I despise being scolded, but if it helped keep peace, even temporarily, I reluctantly saw it as a necessary evil. The next day, Mason's cold demeanor lingered as he left for work, his parting words sharp: "Make sure dinner's ready when I get home." I exhaled deeply, my mind on the day ahead. I had scheduled a day off to visit the gynecologist for fertility testing, something Mason had insisted on, though he refused to participate himself. It was frustrating to go through this alone, but complaining wouldn't help. If the problem lay with me, I wanted to start treatment immediately. Understanding that fertility could decline with age, I was eager to address any issues soon. The clinic was crowded, and I waited an hour before my examination. After a series of tests, the doctor informed me that the results would be available at my next appointment. The possibility that I might be the one with fertility issues was daunting, but I was ready to take whatever steps were necessary. When Mason returned home that evening, I told him I went for the fertility test today. His response was, "Figures. If the problem's with you, it's good you're getting tested. Let me know the results." His assumption that I was to blame for our difficulties in conceiving was hurtful. 6 years passed, and I turned 37. Our attempts to have a child continued without success, and it seemed Mason had resigned himself to not becoming a father. His late nights became more frequent, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. When he did, he'd say he was out drinking and singing karaoke until dawn. His behavior reminded me more of a carefree college student than a committed husband, which was incredibly frustrating. My work had become more demanding, and the dream of starting a family had to be sidelined. But Mason's recent actions were becoming intolerable. His disregard for our life together was painfully obvious. One day, after Mason left the house on his day off, I noticed he had forgotten his smartphone in the living room. I picked it up intending to place it in his room, but it rang just then. The caller ID displayed a name, Diana. Assuming she was a colleague, I answered to let her know Mason had left his phone at home. "Hey Mason, you're late. I've been waiting for 50 minutes. Hurry up or we'll miss the park opening." "We haven't had a date in so long," a flirtatious voice said from the other end. The mention of a date stunned me, and I quickly hung up, my heart racing. This woman wasn't just a colleague. She was someone Mason was seeing romantically. Holding his phone, proof of his infidelity, clenched in my hand, I felt a mix of shock and anger. While I struggled with potential infertility, Mason had been carelessly engaging in an affair. His recent distance suddenly made sense, and I stood there trembling with indescribable anger at the betrayal. Realizing that Mason no longer needed me in his life was a devastating blow, but discovering his betrayal made the situation even more unbearable. Determined to confront the issue head-on, I began gathering evidence of his infidelity. Unlocking his smartphone using his birth date was effortless. The call history and messages were dominated by exchanges with someone named Diana, full of affectionate and intimate words that turned my stomach. I meticulously documented everything, taking photos with my phone before returning his device to its usual spot, acting as if nothing had changed. A month passed in this eerie state of our fractured marriage until one day my father, the president of our company, called me into his office. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said solemnly. His grave tone caught me off guard, and I braced myself for serious news, which only compounded the stress I was already feeling. That evening, perhaps sensing the inevitable, Mason suggested that we consider separating. I was already contemplating how to address the divorce given his infidelity, so his initiation was unexpectedly convenient. "Yes, let's divorce," I agreed quickly. Mason seemed taken aback by my readiness, possibly hopeful about his future with Diana. Despite the sting of seeing his relief, I signed the divorce papers he presented. "I can file these tomorrow." "I'll be leaving this house," he said nonchalantly. "Are you sure about the mortgage?" I asked casually, suspecting that he hadn't fully considered his financial situation without me. His job was demanding but not lucrative, and I doubted his ability to manage the mortgage payments on his own. Nevertheless, he was confident, or perhaps just naive. Given his betrayal, I felt no obligation to ease his transition. I moved back to my parents' house a few days later. They were initially worried about my well-being, but became furious when I explained Mason's infidelity. They supported my decision to leave him, reassuring me repeatedly that parting ways was the best course of action. Throwing myself into work, I tried to move past the emotional turmoil of my failed marriage. A year flew by in a blur of commitments and projects. One evening, seeing how stressed and tired I had become, my father suggested, "Why don't you take a trip? It's going to get busy starting next month." Grateful for the suggestion and feeling mentally exhausted, I decided to take a solo trip to the Northeast, craving a change of scenery and some peace. The air in the Northeast was crisp and refreshing, seeming to cleanse my weary soul. I interacted with locals who were incredibly kind and helpful, gradually mending my spirit. I booked a stay in Los Angeles at a renowned hotel, deciding to indulge in the best experience possible. After checking in, I relaxed in the lobby with a welcome drink, the fatigue from my journey melting away. I felt so at peace that I half-joked about moving to Los Angeles. Just then, a familiar voice pierced through the calm. Hey, what are you doing here?" I turned, startled, to find Mason entering the lobby with 2 large suitcases. The unexpected encounter with my ex-husband was the last thing I anticipated on this healing journey. Surrounded by the elegant charm of the Los Angeles hotel lobby, I felt a sudden jolt of reality as I spotted Mason entering with a young woman on his arm. She looked to be in her early 20s, with flawless skin, bold makeup, and striking red nails that contrasted sharply against the northeastern weather. Her attire was bold too, a short skirt despite the cold. My eyes locked onto them in disbelief. "Why are you here, and who is she?" I couldn't help but blurt out, my curiosity getting the better of me despite my doubts about wanting the answers. "Oh, let me introduce you," Mason said with a hint of excitement I hadn't seen in a long time. "This is Diana, my new wife." We're on our honeymoon, and guess what? She's the daughter of a wealthy businessman. The name Diana hit me like a wave. She was the same Diana from the phone call months ago. I felt a surge of discomfort at his obvious pride in marrying someone so much younger and wealthily connected. "You're here alone?" "That's sad," Mason sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Beside him, Diana eyed me with a smirk. "Hey Mason, is this your ex-wife? She looks old." "Hurry up with the check-in," she said, her tone sharp and irritated. I managed to keep my composure as Mason nonchalantly draped an arm around her, boasting, "Yeah, I'm set for life now, marrying into money. You keep struggling in your modest life." Mason's high-pitched laugh cut through the serene atmosphere of the lobby, a stark contrast to the tranquility I had been enjoying. He continued to flaunt his new life. "Yeah, Diana is Goldsmith's daughter. You know Goldsmith Enterprises," he added, seeming overly proud. The mention of Goldsmith Enterprises rang a bell. I recalled it just as Mason's face lit up with childlike glee. "Impressive, huh? Her family's loaded. They even paid off our house mortgage quickly. Thanks for making the divorce easy, Patricia," he said sarcastically. "Yeah, I know them. They're in that big building downtown, right?" "I've been there," I replied calmly, barely fazed by his remarks. Mason looked surprised. "Oh, you've been there? Well, her family owns a huge company, so breaking up with you was the right choice," he smirked maliciously. I nodded, still calm. "That building? It's part of our real estate holdings," I mentioned casually, as if recalling a minor detail. "What do you mean, our real estate?" Mason and Diana chimed in together, both perplexed. "That building is rented by my father for his most prestigious office. I'm not sure if your company is involved in real estate, but it's certainly not a shabby building," I explained with a serene tone. Their skepticism was palpable. I paused, knowing there was no turning back. "Yes, I know how grand it is. I was there when my father purchased that building for about $500 million. Recently, he was complaining about a tenant not paying their rent. Turns out it was your company. In fact, my father is a real estate magnate with assets worth $5 billion, and that building is one of them. Goldsmith Enterprises has been the tenant for the past few months, and they haven't paid their rent," I revealed, watching their reactions closely. Diana burst out laughing, disbelief written all over her face. "That can't be true." "Our company's doing great," she claimed, still laughing. But the shock in her eyes told a different story. Despite the shock of seeing Mason with his new wife, I was determined not to be drawn into their drama. Yet Diana's loud claims that their company could surely pay the rent echoed around us, hinting at denial or deceit. Her tone was dismissive, suggesting I was lying just to create discord between her and Mason. Realizing a simple conversation wouldn't suffice, I pulled out my smartphone right there in the hotel lobby. "I'm here with the daughter of Goldsmith Enterprises," I told my dad over the phone. "Can you send me a photo of the rent reminder notice?" Within moments, my father sent a clear image of the notice addressed to Goldsmith Enterprises, showing 4 months of unpaid rent. I showed the image to Mason and Diana, doubting they could dismiss it as fake given the immediate proof. "See if you don't pay soon, we might have to consider legal action." "What are you going to do?" I asked calmly. Diana's confidence wavered as she mumbled, "Come to think of it, Dad has been stressed lately, talking about slow sales and firing a lot of employees." Mason, however, seemed to spiral into denial, accusing me of fabricating the story to split them up. "You're just trying to trick us and tear us apart, aren't you? You're still that kind of person, trying to get back at me for remarrying. Your tactics are dirty," he shouted, causing me to step back, shocked by his loud, accusing voice. His words brought back painful memories of our marriage, of all the harsh things he had said when things got tough between us. But now, standing here, I was no longer the person who took his words silently. "What are you even saying, Mason? Do you really think I still have feelings for you? How foolish. I've long been over a man like you. In fact, I feel sorry for Diana getting caught up with someone like you," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Did you marry her just for her money? You had shallow reasons for marrying me too, like wanting to get married quickly and wanting kids. And who was it that left me when he found out we couldn't have kids? Who called me useless for being infertile? You're to blame for all of it. Yet you think I still have feelings for you. You must be out of your mind." Mason's face turned red with anger. "You're just an arrogant old hag. You probably can't even get married or have kids anymore. Diana and I are planning to have fun making a baby after this trip," he retorted, his voice thick with desperation. It was then I decided to reveal the truth to finally put an end to his assumptions. "Oh, I didn't mention it, but I'm 5 months pregnant. I'm in the stable phase of my pregnancy, so my dad suggested I take this trip to relax," I revealed calmly. "That's right. After our divorce, I found someone who truly supports me, my boss at work, who happens to be a subordinate of my father. He has been a great support, both personally and professionally. I found out I was pregnant just 5 months ago. It was a quick marriage, but my company and my father celebrated it grandly." Mason's face fell, his earlier bravado evaporating as he processed the news. "You're pregnant? So were you using birth control?" The question was absurd, and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of pity and relief as I looked at him. My life had moved on from the chaos he brought into it. Now more than ever, I was sure of my path forward, strengthened by the support of my new husband and the imminent responsibility of leading my father's company, especially as he planned to retire soon due to health reasons. My future, though once intertwined with Mason's, was now firmly my own, filled with new beginnings and free from his shadow. Mason's confusion was palpable as he stomped his feet, bewildered by the revelation. "Birth control? I never did that. Remember, I told you I had infertility tests at the clinic, and they found no issues. So the problem wasn't just with me," I said, my words blunt and to the point. His face contorted with realization. "Does that mean Diana and I can't have kids? Why did I divorce you to marry Diana?" He muttered to himself, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "What do you mean, why?" "You felt betrayed knowing he was infertile," Diana snapped back, her anger flaring at Mason's self-centered logic. Realizing I had no reason to engage further, I delivered my final statement. "That's why. From now on, please keep your affairs separate from mine. Regarding the rent for Goldsmith Enterprises, I expect full payment. If you intend to continue leasing the building, please settle the overdue rent soon. Otherwise, we'll need to pursue legal action. I have nothing more to say to you. Goodbye." With that, I left Mason and Diana in mid-argument and confidently returned to my hotel room. Upon my return from the trip, my husband greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome back. Sorry I couldn't help around the house. Was everything okay?" "Of course it was fine. I'm just glad you got to relax, Patricia." "Thank you," he replied, his smile genuine and comforting. Since marrying my current husband, I felt reassured daily, and thoughts of Mason had faded into the background. After that incident, I didn't see Mason again. But through my father's contacts, I learned that Mason and Diana's situation had worsened. Despite his initial belief that he was marrying into wealth, Mason discovered that Goldsmith Enterprises was steeped in debt. News had spread across TV channels about an employee at Goldsmith Enterprises embezzling millions from clients. Diana's father had known about the fraud but attempted to cover it up to protect the company's reputation. However, once the scandal became public, Goldsmith Enterprises' stock plummeted and the company lost its credibility. A mass exodus of employees followed. In such a dire state, it was clear they couldn't possibly cover their rent, let alone recover from the scandal. This turn of events reaffirmed my relief in having moved on from that chapter in my life, as I focused on a future filled with stability and genuine affection with my new husband.